please welcome to the stage Lauren Sachs.
Good afternoon. My name is Lauren Sachs, and it is truly my great honor and privilege to have the opportunity to speak with you today. Like those of you in attendance, I have walked my own painful path of grief and know all too well how it touches one's life in a profound and immeasurable way. For me, it has been over 3 years since I lost my husband, who was 49, and the father of our 2 school-age daughters. In my case, my husband Brad died very suddenly and unexpectedly from a massive heart attack the week before our 18th wedding anniversary. In the time since his loss, as I have worked on healing, I've had the opportunity to reflect not only on my own bereavement, but to consider how loss and grief changes each of us. In many fundamental ways, I believe that grief is like a hidden disability. As we walk through life after a loss, the turmoil of our inner world remains largely unseen, while the people we encounter day to day cannot discern the invisible wound we carry with us wherever we go. Those of us who have felt the anguish of grief know how deeply it cuts and how it pervades every aspect of our lives. Though it cannot be seen with the naked eye, we get the choice to share this identity, this most intimate part of our identity, when and where we think it is appropriate. Still, as in the case of a disability, we often find that even some of our closest friends and family cannot fully relate to our struggles and how much it can impact our functioning. As my husband died without warning, I did not connect with hospice until after his untimely passing. Over the past few years, Hospice of Northwest Ohio, and the bereavement department specifically, have become an important part of my life and a key element to my healing. At Hospice and in the spousal loss support group, I have found a community of mourners who can not only relate to the intensity of the pain, but whose own stories have helped me maintain perspective and find perseverance. Since my husband died in the earliest months of the pandemic, I initially attributed much of the profound sense of isolation and loneliness I felt at that time to the many pandemic-related restrictions which were put in place to prevent the spread of COVID-19. However, as I've listened to the stories of those in my group, I've learned that this sense of seclusion is not unique to those of us who lost our loved ones in the darkest days of the pandemic. It seems a great irony to me that loss should feel like such a singular experience when all of us are mortal beings who will eventually face death in one way or another. Over time, I have come to understand that much of the loneliness of loss stems from the false belief that we will be unable to find a community in our time of bereavement. Through hospice and my support group, I have come to feel so much less alone in my grief, as I have developed a powerful sense of kinship with my fellow widows and widowers. Despite the incredibly diverse backgrounds and life histories of the group members, we share a strong sense of affinity and connection. Standing before you today, I want you to know that no matter how isolating and lonely loss can feel, you are not alone. I know all too well how impossible it can be to grapple with grief. Be assured, I see you, and I feel your pain. I hope you will also take a moment to appreciate that just by being here today, you have become part of a community of mourners, as we are all united by our shared loss and the love we feel for those who have come and gone from our lives. Aside from this community of mourners helping me to feel less alone, I also learned a great deal from my fellow mourners about the universality of the experience. One of the most profound and common things I have heard from others experiencing profound grief has to do with the intensity of feelings one experiences after the loss of a loved one. Early in my loss, I wanted to push away all these intense feelings, imagining what it would be like to pack up all these strong emotions in an immense box and ship it off to a far-flung destination just so I could avoid having to deal with it day to day. Not only have I learned that others share in this desire to escape the pain of loss by avoiding their feelings, but I've also learned that grief can cause even the most stoic among us to be riddled with daily bouts of crying and sadness. I've listened to the stories of outwardly rough and tough former soldiers reduced to a puddle of tears when sharing about the person who they once held most dear. Still, no matter how difficult it can be to cope with the intensity of loss, particularly in the early stages of grief, I've also learned that allowing myself to actually feel my feelings and fighting the urge to push away these seemingly impossible emotions helped me work through the pain more effectively. In fact, over time, the more I allowed myself to experience the sorrow and pain, the greater room I found to revisit the happy memories and the precious times that my husband spent with our family. I now know that I can hold the sorrow with the joy. I also understand that to feel loss deeply means that one has loved deeply. One day in group, we discussed the fact that while none of us wanted to experience the intense sorrow of loss, we were all grateful for having had such great love in our lives, and if given the choice, even now, we would not trade that love to avoid the heartache of loss. Another aspect of loss, which is unique to my situation, but has truly helped me find a sense of peace, is considering how my late husband would have wanted me to experience his passing. My husband Brad was a physician who specialized in hematology and oncology, meaning he treated patients with blood and cancer diagnoses. Throughout his career, he witnessed suffering and loss on a regular basis. His line of work and the trials his patients experienced also greatly influenced his own approach to life. Despite the challenges posed by his work, Brad was incredibly full of vigor, energy, and humor. He always lived like a man on a mission, seemingly trying to fit in as much fun and do as much good as he possibly could. As I struggled to grapple with my grief after his death, I began to consider how he might want me to live my life in his absence. Doing so brought me great clarity and a new view on moving forward day to day. It occurred to me that he would want me to embrace my life and find happiness, even if it meant doing so without him. Since Brad truly understood the fragility of life, he also understood how precious our time on earth really is. Not only did examining his life teach me how to find resilience, I realized that I could share these lessons with his most important legacy, our daughters. While my girls and I understood that we should allow ourselves time and space to grieve, considering Brad's approach to life helped us realize what he would have wanted for us. It also helped me and my girls to find strength to persevere both through the pandemic, but also through all of life's trials and tribulations. Brad not only tried to find joy in life, but he also was able to find humor in the most unusual places. For example, I recall his sister sharing an anecdote with me about the time Brad joined his siblings at the hospital where his mother was having an orthopedic procedure. While in the waiting area, Brad joked around with his siblings and managed to act so silly and absurd that it prompted one of the nurses on the floor to ask this highly educated specialist physician if he had ever actually been in a hospital before. Even after he died, recollecting this sort of story with my daughters still manages to make us all laugh and smile. It's precisely this sort of approach to living life with humor and zest that has strongly influenced my own outlook on life and helped me better assist my daughters in navigating the choppy waters of grief. Well, I began my remarks explaining how grief is akin to a hidden disability. After taking time to start the healing process, I also discovered that grief can be like a hidden superpower too. Living through loss helped change my outlook on life and gave me a greater sensitivity to those around me. I almost feel as though grief provided me with a sort of X-ray vision, allowed me to look past the surface answer people provide to the perfunctory question, how are you today? Not only have I become more attuned to others' pain due to loss, but I've developed a much greater empathy for those whose lives have been touched by the other myriad challenges of living. In many ways, I feel as though grief broke my heart open, both literally and figuratively, but it also meant that my heart was now more open and receptive to love, gratitude, and compassion. Though I am further along on my path of grief than most of you here today, I hope that you will all find healing and peace. I also hope that someday your hidden disability turns into a hidden superpower, and that you will share the same healing and peace with everyone who touches your life. Thank you.